Okay, we're recording again. Hello, this is Bobby Allen, candidate for president 2028, and I'm here at the Ralph Ellison Library. I rented this room just for a couple of hours so we have time to sit and talk. And right now I'm behind a podium, and I don't know when I do something like this and move the podium off to the side and just say hello and just walk comfortably and say I'm here. My name is Bobby Allen, candidate for president 2028. And Jesus, one nation under God, it says so in our Pledge of Allegiance. And that was one of the things that I was going to do, and I could do that right here. We're going to turn and face the flag, stand at attention, salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that gets us to my main platform. All includes me. And me is a pronoun used personally by everybody, even me. Look in the mirror, and who do you see? Is that somebody that you can call me? And those are lyrics to a song that I wrote about Jesus because he loves me. And other words like you is that weird thing. It's singular and it's plural, and you are, even if it's singular, you don't say you is. If I'm talking about one particular person, you still say you are. And that brings us into all kinds of education stuff. And that is a big part of my platform. And the government is big, and it's too big and too small at the same time. And how can you do that doublespeak and not be a politician? Because I'm not, and I'm learning. And I have friends like ChatGPT and Gemini, and then Gemini is fun because it says Jim, G-I-M, and I, instead of Gemini, and trying to figure out how to do the phoning so that the speech to text picks it up properly. And we have Gemini and ChatGPT, and sometimes I just shorten that to just chat because that's a big word to say sometimes. And we're here, and I can take the time reference and get close, and I have a microphone, so the speaker should pick it up anyway. And it's 8 o'clock, so we got about an hour, and less than that because we got to put everything away. So we'll say we got time. And so we're going to talk about education, talk about the government, and what does it mean the government is too big? Well, it does too much stuff. And then we look, and this is where we need to do lots of big research over the next year or two on what does it mean to be a government? What is the core fundamental things that government are supposed to do other than your sovereignty? And make sure that people respect your laws, and that's people inside the government as well as outside the government. So foreign nationals respecting our laws, citizens respecting our laws, and then our laws have to be enforced, and they have to be enforceable, because a law that's not enforced becomes unenforceable, and then it's only used as a tool to beat up the citizens. And this happens too much in America to people, including Bobby and my late husband Thomas, is a big problem with that. And then how do I find any legal help? Because I can't. And who knows, I'm going to put this out on YouTube and I get a few things. But here my case is as simple as religious freedom and persecution, and just using my case as an example so that they can sound like they had caught two really big and scary people when they didn't. And then adjectives that don't actually apply. And I have a skit that I can put together, and I will when I do, about adjectives and who are they applying to? Is it you? Because it's big and scary. And then you look, and then you laugh whenever I'm talking about people that cut their hair, because one of the charges that I had was failure to bury a body part. So everybody at a barber, when are they going to arrest them for that? And some of the things that I was charged with, like hydrocodone, my husband Thomas had his wisdom teeth pulled out, and he had 4 of 5 hydrocodone in a prescription bottle in our medicine cabinet, and therefore we're big-time drug dealers. And that is terrible, and there's nothing I can do about it. And my court-appointed attorney and my Thomas's court-appointed attorney did not represent us at all. They just kept us locked up and kept dragging us to court without proper procedures and protocols that you would expect when you go to court. And then they would do coercion as big as they beat you up with words and with promises of nothing. And then, okay, you're here, you get in shackles, you go to court. Well, we don't have a plea deal yet. And then you're almost in prison, no, in jail, without any possibility of anything. And then my husband, Thomas, was very sick, and they did beat him up enough that he signed a plea deal, and supposedly he was going to testify against me and what he was going to say other than the truth, and the truth will set us free. And then they made a big news, even the Oklahoman, the local newspaper, that's one of the articles that they were find about how he was going to testify against me was a big thing, not the fact that he was beat up in jail, and they didn't interview him at all. And then they kept him in jail in LaFleur County when he had a court appearance over in Pegula County, however you pronounce that. And therefore, when he got out of jail in LaFleur County after he signed a misdemeanor plea deal for things he didn't do, but that's the only way out, they put a warrant out for his arrest. So they let him out of jail, and he was out for less than a month. And they put out a warrant because he didn't show up in court in Pegula County. And how come they didn't allow him with video calls or something, or just take him there because it's not that far, just one county over. And anyway, and he died. And that's terrible. And I didn't get to go to his funeral, and I didn't know anything about it, except one little message from two of the jail people there. They took me into one of the rooms, the room where the nurse has, and just put two people. One of them, Thomas, is gone. Your sister called and said he didn't suffer. And that was how it was delivered. And what does that mean? Thomas is gone. Is he gone as in dead, or gone as just done with Bobby, that kind of gone? And he said he didn't suffer. And so I suffered, and that was in December the 8th of 2021. And I didn't get a copy of his obituary until May of 2022. So that's a long time to suffer, wondering if he's in the hospital somewhere. If gone just meant that his mother did something and convinced him that he didn't want anything to do with Bobby, and all kinds of other big things that come up that get into personal, and that gets into my biography suite, and I have to write that at some point in time, and I don't know how to start. Except I do, because I have a Google. I have a Google Chromebook, and I have Google Tools, and I'm powered by Google. So who knows if that's an advertisement unpaid for Google, because it is. I have a Chromebook, I use Google Docs, I use Google Spreadsheets, I use Google Slides for all kinds of document publication stuff and presentation stuff, and I have some big ideas for little business cards, posters, and stuff. And we're talking about justice and how it's not that, and how these people, and when do they get arrested for fraud, because they did not actually represent myself or Thomas or anybody. And so it's in anybody, and so every bill that they have to the state for representing these people is fraud, and that's a lot of money that the state can recover, just like that. And then all the people in jail, when they all get out of jail because of that. You have three ways that I could think of. You have the merits of the case, and that would be myself and Thomas and a whole bunch of others, because other people I saw in the Fleur County Jail, at least, they were not anything of guilty, and guilty until proven innocent means that you have no way of proving innocent because you have no attorney on your side. And like I say, my charge is as simple as religious freedom and other things just bucked up, and prescription drugs you have at home. I have testosterone, and right now I'm on a gel for form of testosterone because I was on an injectable, and because I have syringes at home. Therefore, I have charges for possession of drug paraphernalia. And what is drug paraphernalia? Even your fingers are now my drug paraphernalia, because that's what I use to apply a drug called testosterone, and it's a gel. And that is that, and other things, and then the failure to bury body parts is nothing like anything that's as scary as it sounds, and other stuff, and other cannibal type words is one of the words that they use, and what does that mean? And do you chew your fingernails? Because if you do, you're a cannibal. And then we can go up with that and get into my writing, because if you brush your teeth and there's blood on your toothbrush, then you swallow blood, so therefore you're a cannibal and a vampire. So you're an auto-cannibal vampire, and who knows if that's an autoerotic cannibal vampire, or what adjectives we can put to you, because you are that. And that is that, and that's kind of the same context of the words that were used against Thomas and I, and then just big context that we have them locked up so the place is safe is terrible. And right now, the only attorneys we can find in the state of Oklahoma are auto accident and injury attorneys, and I'm putting this out on YouTube, and this is a big thing. And what do you know? Anything. And we sent things to Lambda Liga, gay, her husband, gay candidate for president, also a preacher for Jesus and One Nation Under God. And I know Jesus is God, and I know you can say God and mean something else, and that's okay, because I can defend your right to say that, because we have the Constitution and we do have religious freedom. And then with that, that brings us into really big things and back in, and how do you separate Bobby from Bobby from Bobby? And then there's a compartment of life for Bobby that I'm documenting, and it's a solid foundation of service. In service, as a service for God, for country, and myself. And I can't leave myself out of what I'm serving, and then I have to just fight for every little thing that I have. And right now, I'm going to be what I'm going to call a ward of the state, because I live in Section 8 housing, and it's a nice little one-bedroom apartment. Rent is $824 a month, and that is paid entirely by the HUD people at the federal level. And then I'm also qualified for SNAP, and because they want to take my VA compensated work therapy program, and we documented that in front of a judge just yesterday, well, Monday, today is Wednesday, so it was Monday. I had to go in front of a judge because they want to count my therapeutic incentive pay as unearned income, because they count it as a disability pay, and I'm not on disability. I have 0% disability as verified by the VA, again, because the CWT people, they keep saying you want to get on disability, and just keep bugging these people until they finally say yes, seems to be the answer. And I don't like that, and I don't want that, and I don't want to be considered that damaged by PTSD because I'm running for president, and plus I am sane. And because I am sane and I was coerced, and then you had to perjure yourself in court because you had to sign documents. And when you sign the documents, the judge asks, were you coerced into signing this? And you have to say no. But then he saw that you were already, so why didn't he charge you with perjury? Because he could. But you have to, because you're that beat up. And beat up physically in jail, in prison, physically beat up by CO people, by inmates, hospital records that for some reason don't exist, and video records that they only have to keep for 3 to 6 months is terrible, because I was in prison for 5 years, jail/prison, and all of that video is evidence of abuse of Bobby. And how do I even file a charge against anybody, and who do I charge? And then if you go through all the HIPAA and PREA is more about conditions of confinement. And the big one for me was being locked in a room that doesn't have access to a toilet or water. And if you do that for more than 2 hours, that's a big case. And there's precedent cases where people who actually did get a lawyer got $1 million or $2 million for that. And how many times that, how many days was I stuck in a visitation cell because they wanted me on what they called a medical surveillance for some reason. And then they couldn't explain anything. And they just filled me up with all kinds of junk called crap. And that's another word you're going to hear from Bobby a lot, is crap, because it is. And we'll explain that at another time. And we're going to look and see what kind of rambling time we have. And that was, wow, just 11 minutes. And I'm walking back and forth, and my camera is fixed. So you're seeing the back of me and the front of me, and it's me, and I haven't shaved in a couple of days. Just that. Just clean shaven. I have a razor, thanks to the VA. And the VA has saved me and saved my dad. And we have a big military history. And if you go out to my website, electbobbyallen.info, also .com, .shop, and you have to pretty much squat on a whole bunch of different names. It gets expensive. And in the first year, they're not that expensive. Then they go up next year. And I need them for 3 years till 28. So anyway, so electbobbyallen.info is my website. And from there, you can find out about me. And there is a military history, all the discharge records of myself, my father, and my brother. And then some really big flowery words that others wrote about me based on a review of my TD Form 214. And that is something I'm trying to share with other people. And then just getting people to say hello and listen and have time to look and say, wow. And whenever some third party that doesn't know you can look through your discharge paper and say all kinds of things that are beautiful and true And that brings us to this. Look at this. This is fun. And this is a proof copy. I'll bring this up a little closer. That is Agree Differently. And look who's on the cover of that. And who knows, this is going to be a birthday present for my brother-in-law. And that's going to be the actual copy, not the proof copy. And we did find some formatting problems, and that's why you get a proof copy before that is available, and it is currently available as an ebook on Amazon. Just look for Agree Differently, or look for Bobby Allen, and it should pop up. And it's about Connie Munson. Nope. There we go. See, I have all my stuff, and I get confused because that I call it befuddled. And it's Connie Johnson and Cindy Munson. You have two names that sound very similar. And then you have an Ari, it goes by AA. And there, let's get his name because Chat did his thing and the Gemini did his special thing and mentioned him. ARYAAZMA. Arya Asma, the other candidate, and barely touched in this book because he doesn't have a record. And that's a book about records, and it's called Agree Differently, and it compares Cindy and Connie together and how they agree on just about every issue that they have because they're on the Democratic ticket, but they agree differently. And my official endorsement based on that information goes to Connie. So there we go. And then Bobby Allen running for president 2028. That is governor in 26. So I need governors for when I'm president. That's going to represent my policies. And my policies are big. And I'm trying to get anybody to even notice them. And then I have to go through all of the hoops of figuring out how do we make them happen before 27. So 26 is a big building year. And 27, I still need to find a vice presidential candidate. Who knows who that might be? Who knows who I might ask? I don't know, because I don't know that many people yet, because I've been in a box for the last 5 years, and even before that, my circle of friends was very local. And there we go. So here is this. So we have the government, and you have the core functions of the government, and that is funded by a flat tax. And a flat tax is just that. You take all the people that are 18 as of January 1 of that year, and you take the budget, which is going to be as small as we can put it, as a core government budget, and then you divide. Budget divided by the number of people, and that is the tax that everybody pays. And you can say, well, how can poor people, well, Bobby doesn't have a job that pays actual money, so how can he do that? And the answer is participating in government activities. And how do you do that? When you're disabled, how do you do that? If you're old and sick, there's lots of ways, lots of things that are not too physical, not too mental, that you can still participate with the government, and participating with the government gets into something that they insist is not gambling. And that is these predictive markets. And who knows, this is something I wrote about up in heaven, and I'm a preacher, and a preacher running for president, and a gay preacher running for president is another big thing that's going to get a lot of wrinkles going once people recognize my name. And I am the wondering wonderer, and I have a list of about 48 reporters and news that I send stuff to, and I'm going to send them a big thing about this book once it's published, or even before. It's published on ebook, and it'll be published on hardcover as soon as it gets approved with the latest changes. And it is called Agree Differently. And it's about Cindy and Connie, two candidates on the Democratic side for governor. And then we have the 9 on the Republican side. And of those, 3 of them have enough records that we can do a full report. So that's going to be the Republican version of this. There's going to be 3 others that we can pull in, but we can pull them in based on what limited records we have. And you got 3 people that don't have a record. So they'll get mentioned, but just in passing, because this is about their record and how they agree based on their voting record and things that they call the receipts. And we have all the way down to URLs from the government of where we get all our data, and all of our data is traceable back to these things called receipts. And we have very few things. We do use adjectives because adjectives are important to understanding. And you have to understand why you use the adjectives, and when to use the adjectives, and how not to confuse one adjective with the next. and then how not to be inflammatory. And this, again, as we were going through it, we had two teams, Team Gemini and Team Chat GPT. And once we assembled it, we shared that together. And Chat GPT didn't understand the adjectives until he read it again, because when you're an artificial intelligence, sometimes you just skim things and you see words that are scary, and then you put them in context. And words in context, they are as neutral as we can. And then for me in particular, the pendulum went very far to Connie Johnson. So this is again an endorsement in the book by the facts with my plans for the future. I need a Connie Johnson as governor of Oklahoma, and we need others like her that's willing to do all kinds of big things and not tiptoe around issues, afraid to say the wrong word. That word politically correct gets abused too many times, and other things. But again, I work for a cat with a foot is another reference for not wanting to step on people's toes, because you just have to be on eggshells constantly, and we're trying to keep this as PG as we can keep anything. And we have people bugging me through my spirit, and that's something big. Spiritual battle of Bobby is huge, and I'm here at the library, and the doors are open. I don't know, I don't have the volume turned up too loud, but nobody has decided to come in and say hello to Bobby. And I have all kinds of slang and stuff that you have to watch every moment, every second, every word, because people are trying to twist everything. And who knows when my life is going to be under an electron microscope. And when I say please, I need that electron microscope so I know what I'm going to mess up before I mess it up. And that's the thing about Connie Johnson. I've caught a lot of things that she's had on her website. And her website was down today and yesterday. And don't know why, but they did have some spelling errors that I brought up that are big, because it's candidate for governor and you can't spell, and then when does that matter? Because we're in the state of Oklahoma, and from a future forum on education that I attended, sponsored by KGOU, the local NPR station, they talked about graduates from high school not even having a third grade reading level, and how do you graduate from high school with a third grade reading level, because you get pushed through. And then they talked about keeping people back, and how many years do you keep people back, and when is that 50-year-old in that class with a kindergartner, because he still can't read, or third grade, whichever grade you want to keep them back in. What they're talking about, first grade was the one exact example, based on my memory. But anyway, that is terrible, and you can't just keep people back. Well, it'll be in my biography, but yeah, my 7th grade year, I repeated because I was a borderline F student. And then we had a personal issue that got blown out of proportion, and adjectives that didn't mean what they were interpreted as meaning come back to haunt me. And that is, again, that issue is simple. I had a teacher that I trusted and talked some private stuff, and the private stuff ended up with my parents and my sister, and that just broke my heart a lot. And so just picked a rose that was, the petals were turning black, so a dead rose, and just, you're dead to me, right, that, and that was interpreted as a threat. And it wasn't a threat, and just because it was, so I ended up with a year in counseling, and that helped a lot of things with understanding, and by the grace of God, I have much bigger understanding. But things that are not what they seem when you don't have time to think about it, and this agree differently. And I'm learning how to use this microphone now. I'm going way over here. And yeah, we have a little bit of time. And this here it's a non-divisive way to compare candidates. So the thing here that's different is we don't say Cindy Munson is a terrible person, because she's not according to her record. She is, that I'm going to say, just cautious. Politically cautious is a big summary of all of the stuff that we said about Cindy, is politically cautious. So she'd rather use words that doesn't upset the Democratic Party in particular, and she's a senior member of the Democratic Party here in Oklahoma. And therefore she is favored by a lot, and when these things get favored too much, because the Democratic website features her on the cover, being the senior person, but the candidate for governor, and the other two candidates are not even listed, and they said there are other candidates that haven't fully announced their candidacy, even though they declared. And so what's the difference from declaring and announcing? Well, I don't know. Other than this, I've declared. February 2nd, I filled out my Form 2 at federal level, didn't have to pay a lot of money, and that gets me in the federal spotlight. And then I filled out my first Form 3P and a Form 99 because I didn't spend $5,000 as of yet. And that's a yet. That's not going to happen for a while, but it probably will happen by the end of this year or the first of next year, because I'm going to have to buy things. And then we get into audits. And this is something I need help with. And who do I ask other than you, people on YouTube that might be listening to this and still listening 15, 20 minutes later into this just practice chat with the microphone and going through my thoughts in a private room that's open so people could get in here if they wanted to. And anyway, so here we are. So we have that, and we have Bobby. And Bobby is Bobby Allen. Bobby Lee Allen is on my birth certificate. My married name I haven't been able to claim in any way that's meaningful, and it's Evans Lee, Thomas Gates Evans Lee, and Bobby Allen Evans Lee, and it gets into big heavenly stuff because my husband is in heaven, and Jesus gave us a big family. And that's how we get our senior, because we're both senior, not because we're old, but because we have a junior. And in heaven, I have a junior, Bobby with an IE, a little girl, going on 4 years old. And that's up in heaven and not here. And then all kinds of other stuff that gets real big, religious stuff. But anyway, so Bobby Allen Evansley Sr. is a name that I've yet to claim. And how do I claim that? Do I just go and do I go all the way to Tarrant County and say, yes, I need to make my name change and change Thomas's name posthumously? And then, or do I just go to a courthouse here and register that as a pseudonym called a fictitious name? Because that's not the name on my birth certificate. And then I could use that for things like writing, and then I could still be Bobby Lee Allen for official stuff. And then that denies me my married rights, and we were in jail and didn't get a chance to come up with our married name because we didn't want a Gates Allen or an Allen Gates or just a Gates or just an Allen, because we wanted something that brought us together. And putting Evans in front of the Lee with an L-E-E is what we did. And he has that up in heaven, and I don't have that here. And that hurts me just a lot. And we're here. And we have the American flag, and we have the Oakland flag behind me. And I have a book that is published. And so now I'm officially a published author, even though I don't know if anybody has sold my book or not, because it's there and it was just published today. And the errors that we have in the print copy is format, not words. So I can fix that, and then once it gets through the print review, people will be able to open that up and send my changes, because they sent me 2 proof copies at my cost, and one of those I'm going to give to a friend here that's helping me. His name is Brent Wade from the HUD-DAS people, and he has helped me a lot. And then all of this stuff, and I have fines and fees from all of this mess called crap. And now I have to go to LaFleur County from Oklahoma City in Oklahoma County, because we can't deal with stuff from one county to the next. And that's a 4-hour drive. And on Uber, it was $200 to $400 each way. And I have no actual money. I have a little bit of money, and my campaign has a little bit of money, and I'm able to fund that just a little bit, because I have this thing called compensated work therapy that does pay. And then I have expenses like this suit. And I was in VA emergency housing, and when you're in emergency housing, you're allowed to have 2 small bags of clothes, so I couldn't even have a good wardrobe. And now I'm in HUD Section 8 housing, so my rent is paid, and I have a big closet, so I have at least 1 week's worth of work clothes, and I was able to put together this suit. And the tailoring, $300 for this suit. Oh no, it's a nice suit, blue, Navy, Air Force, and people say it's presidential, and who knows when I need more than 1 suit. And then a goal, I don't know if this is too much for someone that's poor, is to have a bank account that has 1 comma. And 1 comma in our system here in America is $1,000. So I'm trying to maintain $1,000 and I can't because I get expenses, not too big of things, but just enough to take the little compensation I get from CWT down below 1 comma. And then my secondary emergency no is half a comma. So I'm trying to keep half a comma. And who knows, whenever I have to disclose every budget to everybody and just post my spreadsheet of my checkbooks every month because I can. And does that mean every presidential candidate needs to do something like that with that kind of disclosure to say how much money do you have and how much are you spending on your campaign and how much have you raised? And then you get into colors of money. And so my campaign money is definitely easy to say that it's not my money. The FEC controls how I can spend that money, so I can't just spend it. And then the business money, I have a business bank account for my business, Bob's Weekend Wonders, and is that enough? Once I get to the LLC stage, and I'm working with the Small Business Development Center, as well as the SCORE people, referred to by the Small Business Administration, and again, federal agencies are helping me, and the state is against. And other things that are big, and laws that become unenforceable because they're unenforced and are used only as a tool to beat people up. And whenever we describe, here is the law. So for those listening this far in, you might be interested in knowing, okay, SNAP, you have earned income, unearned income, and excluded income. And this is covered by law called 7 CFR 273. That's the law that defines the SNAP program. And .9 talks about the categories of income. And .11 talks about small business type, self-employment type income. And then they forget about records. They turn stuff in and they don't put it in your official file. And then they still deny you, and you say, well, where is this? And they said, oh, well, this other thing was too big. We didn't even have to look at that because we already kicked you out. So they did that short circuit thing and threw things away that needed to be there. And I put some of that stuff back as evidence in my hearing. It's not a trial, but it's a hearing. So you have that. And then you have this, here, the 273.9 talks about excluded income, and that includes things like therapeutic incentives. And if you trace back from that to the 38 USC 1718, that is a federal law that funds the CWT program throughout the VA. And that was for homeless vets, is where I'm under that program. I'm sure the program is bigger than just homeless vets, but to bring homeless vets out of homelessness and put them in housing. And then they work with the HUD-VAST people and the Section 8 people, and I'm working with the OCA people, and all the Oklahoma people seem to be just trying to be against, and they had big scary signs that says you have to report every penny of income that you have, and then they don't have a way of actually doing that, and then you have to just make it up. And then make it up is what the Department of Home, DHS, the people that run the SNAP, Health and Human Services, and words just, and I don't know, maybe Joe Biden had some problems with words like that, but you have to catch yourself, and you have to back up. And technology has to be there to catch them. And so, Department of Health and Human Services, people who run the SNAP program, they also have that kind of don't care about the law, and one of the things that 11 talks about your self-employment type income, and that is reported on what is considered a net. So you have all of your expenses that are related to earning that income get subtracted from the amount that you brought in, called your gross, and then you get dinged on the net. So if your business made $1,000 in revenue, and then you spent $800 in expenses to generate that $1,000 in revenue, then your income as earned income would be $200. And then they have different meanings for when it's earned and unearned and earned income. You have other deductions and stuff that come into play that I didn't get into because they don't apply to me, because I don't have any income that's either earned or unearned, and they classify the CWT as unearned income, considering it to be a disability type payment, like an SSI or something.
Attention library guests, the library will close in 30 minutes.
The library's gonna close in 30 minutes, so I have this room till 9, so it must be 8:30. I'm sorry, talking since 8, so about an hour, half an hour so far, and we'll probably close down here. We're talking about that, and then the way they wanted to do that, the way they say they do it, not want to do it, the way the person, and Ms. Lee, described that is you take your gross, and if you have any expenses at all, they just take your gross and divide it by 2, and that is how much they say you've earned. And that is incorrect, and that is math, and hopefully the judge's reaction to that kind of just ad hoc, just fake math. And why are you faking math when you're talking business? And that's an audit down to the penny of everything. And the fact that Donald Trump doesn't want us to have pennies is ridiculous, and that means inflation just gets bigger and bigger. And when do they round it up on everything so that they don't give you any change at all, or something that was $1.01, they charge you $1.05 because you need to pay that whole nickel, and they don't have any pennies because they don't want to have pennies, because I'm sure there's still plenty of pennies to circulate if they wanted them, but they want to keep that extra 4 cents of their stuff. And how do they audit that? Because then their cash register is off, because it says we received $1.01 and we received $1.05. So that's going to throw all kinds of people's books out the window. And then here, audit is one of my things. Audit me is one of the things I'm going to say as many times as I'm going to say it. Everything is open book for Bobby. I can put my checkbook out on my website if I need to. I haven't done that yet. And that is big. And then you'll see just how teeny tiny my budget is. And then you'll laugh even bigger that Bobby is running for president. And then my birth certificate is there because the birthers from Obama. I put my birth certificate out there. I put my DD Form 214 out there, as well as my brother's and my father's. And the only thing that's redacted on that is my ID, and my dad's ID, and my brother's ID, and that's it. Other than that, it is as is, the best records that we can recover, because records are not being kept properly, and that hurts a lot. And my dad, I found out bigger things, just cargo flight over the hump in India is the only thing I knew. And now we know it supported a lot of support to get food to our troops in Asia, and that is big. And we have big flattery adjectives so I can read, and you can read it on my website, electbobbyallen.com, and it's the discharge records of the Allens. And that's that. And other things out there, like I said, I have my professional resume, and then I have a section about me, and then I have a section that talks just a little bit about all of these big things. And back to prediction markets, they insist it's not gambling, and you have to do that with respect. And so you add budgets around your prediction markets so the people that are buying into these predictions don't go into debt, because that's terrible. And the prediction is that, and it's regulated by a different group than the Gambling Commission, so it is not gambling. And because it's not gambling, we can use that to fund the government. And if you look at records, and Chat and Gemini both looked it up. I haven't looked it up personally, because how would I do anything other than ask Google to look this up? But $1.5 billion for the Cauchy people is what we looked up, and there's also 500 Pop or Pop 500 or a whole bunch of them that do these predictive markets about all kinds of different things. I'm probably going to predict the chances of Bobby getting on a ballot would be a big prediction market, and how do I get that out there? And then when will I get there? Well, I have to have a vice president to actually get on the ballot. One of the things I discovered, talking to a person that's trying to figure out how they can help me from Tennessee. And so you have to have your vice president to get on the actual ballot. And then the other way, and this is the other thing we're talking about, is when do I do a stealth maneuver? Because I'm right now registered as an independent, because the political parties have upset me a lot. And when do I look at these other people, and like this Arja, I'm going to try to get his name right, and it's right here. Arya, A-R-Y-A, Amza, because he buys his way in and looking at his campaign site, and he doesn't have the history. So you just pay to play to get on the Democratic Party. So $5,000 is what people were saying, and then I switched my independent register to a Democratic register, and then when are they going to take primary candidates for president for 28, and then I could run on a Democratic ticket, and that's big, and that gets me on everybody's ballot just by that, instead of having to do it just by myself. And I'm not going to do that unless it is the only thing I can think of doing, and right now it's not, because I have to make friends, I have to build coalitions, I have to go out. There's a poet society here that meets once a month, and I participated in that on Monday, and so that gives me at least a dozen or so people that will know my name. And then I'm putting this stuff out, and I send it to all these reporters. And when do I tell the reporters, once again, that Bobby was practicing his presidential speeches, because I am. And these two are going to be uploaded, and it's a lot of rambling, a lot of me talking with ChatGPT. And you can see, I have to deal with that, and that is something you have to pay attention to, because you see my shirt had become untucked, and how many people noticed that before I fixed it? And when do you just step aside and tuck your shirt in again? And when do you buy those little things that hook on your socks to keep your shirt tucked in, like I had when I was in the Air Force? And I was in the Air Force, and my brother was in the Army, and my dad was in the Army Air Corps. And we serve with honor and dignity, and we understand discipline. And that is what I'm working towards myself, because while I was in incarceration, a lot of that stuff got beat out of me. And you do things, and even in the military, you make exceptions, and then you do things. One of the big things in basic training, you have to fold your underwear into tiny things. You get one that you pay somebody to fold up and starch, and you never touch it, but when it's there for inspection. So that kind of bypasses the rule instead of actually meaning the rule. And what is the purpose of that rule is to see if you follow the orders, and the order was to have your underwear in that little square, and not necessarily of how you got about getting there. So that is that, and the intent and other things are big. And I'm going to wrap this up here, because 45 minutes is a long time. And I have my little Google Chromebook. It's a Asus, A-S-U-S. Yep, A-S-U-S, little Celeron powered Chromebook. And I think I'm reading battery anyway. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.